This is a really exciting day for us. We just took delivery of a piece of equipment that we've dreamed of buying ever since we opened up our plumbing company about 3 years ago. We purchased a pipe bursting machine, and it's really going to allow us to deliver a better product to our customers, replace sewers in a better fashion and faster. It's just all kinds of good. Stay with us and follow along as we get this thing unboxed and start digging into all the fun pieces in it. First things first, we got to get this pulling cable off of here. This thing's really freaking heavy, so I'm just going to throw it onto the floor. So nothing about this equipment is lightweight. This thing here, it's probably 150 or 200 pounds. That cable weighs about 1 pound per foot, and that cable's like 150 feet long. This crate right here weighs 1,000 pounds alone. Obviously, we're not gonna carry that out of the truck. We're gonna have to dismantle the crate and take everything out piece by piece. I think in here is our fusion iron to fuse the piping together. It says danger, not explosion proof. That makes two of us. They've got this thing locked into here. So this is our carrying case with our heat shielded bag for the iron. This iron will rest down in there, and the bag keeps things from getting too hot. Very, very good packaging job. I gotta say that. All good signs of good quality control here. This is the facing machine. So what this does, our new sewer piping, is high density polyethylene piping. We butt fuse long sticks of it together, and in order to fuse the ends together, we gotta make sure that both ends are perfectly smooth with each other. If I were a betting man, I'm gonna say this sets right down inside there. Pretty cool to keep everything organized there. Depending on what side you want to work with, this is what allows you to work these independently of each other. So we would set our piping inside these clamps. We drop it down in there, clamp it down really well, same here. And then we would, spread it apart, drop our facing machine in there, squeeze it together, face each pipe, spread it apart, drop the iron in there, and then we're squeezing it together really hard. I don't quite know how this lock works on here yet. That's how it locks together. That's it. As you're squeezing it together, now it's locked and it can't go anywhere. Once it cools off, you spread everything back apart and work from there. Obviously, we're gonna give you guys like a full-blown video of us actually putting this to work. This is just me kind of speculating how this is gonna go. This is the boring part of all of this. This is just the fusion jig that helps us prep the piping. In that big wooden box is the really cool stuff. This cable weighs 1 pound per foot, and this cable is 75 feet long, which means it weighs at least 75 pounds, not including this big old shackle that's on the end of it. How cool is that? They've even got their logo laser engraved onto this big giant pulling plate. This plate is what pushes against the dirt, and then the machine pulls against this plate. What's ironic is I've done pipe bursting for like 15 years. I don't think they were an option when I started doing it 15 years ago. If they were, I didn't know about them yet. 15 years ago, we started running into challenges with our existing pipe bursting machine. We identified that we needed a pulling plate because the machine would suck itself into the dirt if the dirt was too soft. And so we designed a pulling plate very, very similar to this, almost identical to this, even so much so that it had a small channel in it that was too small for the sewer pipe to pull through. One of the challenges that we had was when we were pulling a new sewer through plastic piping, the plastic piping would come into the machine and try to clog the machine up. This keeps the plastic piping at bay and lets the cable pull straight through there. So it's pretty awesome that things have evolved still to that way to where now they include this with the delivery. Next out of the docket, hydraulic hoses. These are gonna end up going back on my truck. We'll set them over here for now. Now we're getting into some cool stuff. It's a user guide that's like in the shape of a notepad. We've got wear parts and cotter keys and all kinds of things. This machine uses these big rubber O-rings, these big rubber bands, and they'll break and dry out and crack and tear from time to time. The machine also uses these big kind of cotter keys that are in here. Anybody who's worked a cotter key You bend it one too many times and it snaps. So we've got extra cotter keys. It looks like we've got some anti-seize. Most likely this is gonna be for the bolts and the assembly hardware to where we're bolting the cable to the bursting head. And then we've got a full-blown user's guide with everything that we need in here. Here is part of a bursting head. And here is the other part of the bursting head. This also might be where some of the anti-seize comes from. The way this bursting head works, something very similar to this. And so basically what happens is we slide our new pipe up behind all of these gripper teeth. And then as we rotate this head, these gripper teeth start to expand out and grab onto the piping. And then as they expand out and grab onto the piping, it makes a really good connection to where this machine will not let go. I hope this machine doesn't end up being too bulky for us and too heavy duty. They do have a smaller version of this one. The smaller version is made for 4-inch and maybe 6-inch piping in certain scenarios. This machine that we got is actually gonna do 4, 6, and even 8-inch piping, so it's a much bigger machine. However, we plan on powering this from our hydraulic excavator, our Bobcat mini excavator. The bigger machine is gonna be able to be powered off that excavator a lot better than the smaller pipe bursting machine would. So this wheel assembly would sit down in one end of the excavation, and we've got a cable fed through the sewer line. And that cable runs through the bottom of the face of it here, and then runs up around this wheel, and this wheel rotates, by the way. And then the cable assembly comes up here to the actual pulling unit. And so this transfers our energy from vertical to horizontal, which is where the sewer is. So the way that we typically pipe burst, not all the time, but I'm gonna say 85 or 90% of the time, this is dropping down in the exterior excavation in their yard. And then we're feeding that cable and bursting head through the interior excavation, which is in their basement. Sometimes we have to do what we call a reverse pull, where this is actually sitting in their basement and we're dropping the pipe and the cable in from their yard. But either which way, you're pulling from one end to the other. Now let's grab the pulling unit. Good God. This thing. You spend $30,000 or $40,000 and they give you a 3-cent pin. Thankfully, this is the only time we're gonna have to lift this thing up and out of a box. Any other time we move this thing, we're using the excavator to pick it up and down out of the hole. We're hauling it around the job site by hand, but we're not having to pick it up and out of such a big, tall box. That baby ain't no slouch. That is one heavy, heavy piece of equipment. So this is one of the really cool parts with this machine. It uses very few moving parts, so the more moving parts you have, the more chance you have for things to go wrong. And I've done pipe bursting long enough that we've seen a lot of failures, especially when it comes to the moving parts of the hydraulic machinery. We want machinery with less moving parts, so there's less of a chance of failure. And one of the other machines that I've got a lot of experience with, they used a hydraulic cylinder to grab the cable, and then they used another set of cylinders to raise up and pull the cable. And then the first cylinder would have to let go of the cable, and then the other cylinders would drop. And then it would just repeat that cycle a couple hundred times. Grab the cable, raise up, let go of the cable, drop down. Well, the problem with that is that's 2 sets of sequencing valves and everything else, and eventually those sequencing valves fail, and when that fails in that setup, you end up destroying your cable, and you're stuck on the job for quite a few extra hours. This one does not use any cylinders to grab the cable, which is really, really cool. Believe it or not, it uses these little O-rings right here. This is what grabs the cable. It's pretty sweet. So these are the jaws that grab onto the cable. And basically they work kind of like a one-way Chinese finger. Basically, as the jaws raise up, they open up on the cable. And as the jaws go down, they squeeze on the cable. Basically, as the cable comes up through the jaws, it raises them on its own. And then, instead of using hydraulics to pull them back down, we use these rubber bands instead. Now, when the cable comes through and raises up, the cable's gonna push these up and the bands pull it back down in place. It has 2 sets of these. There's actually another set down here low on the machine as well. Every job we do, we'll take these bands off. These have to come up and out to feed the cable up in through there, and then they go back down and we put the bands on when we're ready to go. All in all, I'm really impressed with how this all got put together. Being that it's almost Christmas time here, I love that the box says Fragile on it, like the old Christmas story. It's gonna make our company a lot of money. It's gonna save a lot of money for our customers because this allows us to replace sewers faster and with less yard disturbance than the traditional way. And that is where it really, really comes in handy.